If, 2 weeks ago, someone had told me that my husband, Mark Thorne, who spent his days tending his art gallery and spoke to me in hushed, gentle tones, was capable of orchestrating a cross-border legal conspiracy behind my back, I would have laughed out loud. After all, for the past 7 years, I was Evelyn Vance, the million-dollar actuary who commanded the financial district of Manhattan with a razor-sharp mind. Mark, on the other hand, was merely an art enthusiast whose gallery in the West Village I subsidized with my monthly rent payments. I thought I had married for love, even lowering my standards time and again to accommodate his mother, Patricia, who fancied herself part of old European aristocracy but couldn't even pay her own rent. The shift began the day I received a call from my family trust lawyer in Zurich. My distant godfather had passed away, naming me the sole heir to his $50 million trust fund. The paperwork was tedious, but all legal documents had been signed, and the substantial sum was scheduled to be deposited into my personal account the following week. That evening, I brought home his favorite bottle of 1982 Petrus, ready to surprise him. I pushed open the door. The living room was thick with the smell of expensive cigars. My ex-mother-in-law, Patricia, was lounging on my $30,000 custom Italian leather sofa, delicately flicking ash from her cigarette with her manicured, sharp golden nails. The ash fell onto my freshly cleaned cashmere ruga stark, grating contrast of black and white. Mark stood behind her, clutching a thick stack of documents, a flicker of panic in his eyes, and my personal assistant, my so-called best friend Chloe, sat at the dining table, my personal laptop open before her. Evelyn, you're home. Mark cleared his throat, instinctively trying to hide the papers behind his back. I took off my coat, hung it on the rack, and let my gaze sweep over the 3 figures in the room. The atmosphere was thick with the tension of a secret trial in progress. What's going on? I slipped into my flats, walked over, and placed the red wine on the marble coffee table. Quite the gathering tonight. Patricia shot me a withering glance and let out a cold laugh. With a sharp clink, she appended her half-finished cup of coffee directly into the fruit bowl on the table. The expensive crystal dish was immediately stained with murky liquid, soaking the fresh strawberries. Gathering, you still have the nerve for this nonsense? Patricia's shrill voice echoed through the room. Mark can't sleep at night worrying about the gallery's cash flow. And what do you, as his wife, contribute to this family besides prancing around outside all day, dolled up? A woman with a chin held high but unable to produce a son is nothing but a dead end. I had heard this venom countless times over the past 7 years. For Mark's sake, I had always swallowed my pride, even paying over $1 million out of my own pocket to cover his gallery's mounting deficits. But today, watching Patricia's face contort with age and malice, I felt a sudden wave of revulsion. Patricia, the gallery's $30,000 bill last month was paid by me just last week. I kept my voice level, suppressing my emotions. As for having children, that's a personal choice between Mark and me. It's none of your business. You. Patricia's eyes widened, and she slammed her hand on the table, rising to her feet. All right, Mother, that's enough. Mark hurriedly restrained Patricia, then turned to me, a strange light flickering in his eyes. It wasn't guilt, but a bizarre, almost cruel smugness. Mark walked over to me, straightened his tie, and adopted a condescending tone of superiority. Evelyn, since you're home early today, it's convenient. There are some things I don't think we need to hide from you anymore. He handed me a document. I took it. The cover read, in bold black letters, Default Divorce Decree, Family Court of Nevada. My pupils contracted slightly. I opened to the first page. Petitioner, Mark Thorne. Respondent, Evelyn Vance. Status, decree entered. Date of entry, 14 months ago. The document bore the unmistakable red seal of a Nevada court, and on the acknowledgement of service, my name was signed. The signature was remarkably convincing, but at the final flourish of the N in Evelyn, there was a barely perceptible, habitual Pow-C signature trait of Chloe's forged hand. My head snapped up to look at Chloe. Chloe sat there, closed my laptop, and gave me a faint, icy smile. Evelyn, don't look at me like that. Mark's gallery needed funding. And you were too controlling. We just took back Mark's freedom. 14 months ago. My voice was as cold as a glacier before an avalanche. Mark, we've lived under the same roof for 14 months. For 14 months. You've slept beside me every night. Used my credit cards. Spent my money on your gallery rent. And just last month I paid off a €50,000 debt for your art. And you're telling me we've been divorced for 14 months. Mark averted his gaze uncomfortably, but quickly straightened his back. Sneering. Evelyn, watch your words. We haven't had any legal relationship for a long time. As for the money you paid, that was your voluntary gift to me. Nevada law is clear. Given your prolonged separation and failure to respond, the court has already divided the property. Property division. I stared at him. My voice low. Yes. Mark's lips curled into a cruel smile. Including this Manhattan apartment. And 3 other properties under your name. Which have been classified as joint business assets and transferred entirely to my name. Even the Zurich inheritance you're about to receive. My heart plummeted to the bottom of the sea. So that was it. They had been eyeing that $50 million inheritance all along. 14 months ago, while I was on a business trip in Nevada. They forged proof of my residency and the return receipt. Exploiting Nevada's loophole for default judgments to secretly finalize the divorce and quietly transfer my assets. This is fraud, forgery, and extortion. My hand trembled slightly. But my voice remained deathly calm. Fraud. Do you have any proof? Patricia stepped forward, jabbing a finger at my shoulder. The signature is yours. The notice was sent to the Nevada address you once rented. It's your fault you didn't show up. Evelyn. Aren't you supposed to be so clever? Aren't you an actuary? You calculated everything out there, but never calculated your own position in this family. Patricia laughed with unbridled glee, pointing at the door. Now. This house belongs to Mark. You have 1 hour. Pack your junk and get out. At tomorrow's inheritance reception, Mark will be there with you, as your legal ex-husband and assignee of the property agreement. Chloe stood up, walked over to Mark, and naturally took his arm. She looked at me with the contempt of a victor. Evelyn, thank you for all you've done for Mark over the years. But now, you can take your leave. I looked at the 3 loathsome faces before me. At their maddening greed and unbridled arrogance. There was no hysteria in my mind. No sobbing, only a terrifying clarity. Under New York Penal Law 170 for forgery. And the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act RICO. Forging judicial documents and using them to misappropriate substantial assets carries a maximum sentence of 20 years. And the Nevada default judgment, if the service of process can be proven fraudulent, is legally void ab initio, invalid from the start. Mark thought he had calculated everything, but he forgot that in this world, when it comes to mastery of legal clauses and numerical logic, he wasn't even fit to shine my shoes. Slowly, I folded the divorce decree and tucked it into my bag. I looked at Mark. There was no trace of our past affection left in my eyes, only the cold stare one gives the dead. An hour is too long, I said flatly. 3 minutes is all I need. I turned and walked towards the door. As my hand touched the handle, I paused for a moment, glancing back at the 3 smug figures. Mark, Patricia, Chloe. My voice was low and calm. Enjoy your victory tonight. Because starting tomorrow, every dollar you've taken from me will become the blade that cuts your throats. Mark's expression flickered. But Patricia just spat in contempt. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the cold night air. Pulling out my phone, I dialed a number I hadn't used in a long time. Julian, I said, gazing at the glittering Manhattan skyline, my voice frighteningly serene. Activate the highest level legal protocol. Someone stole $50 million from me and gave me a gift. I want them to wish they were dead. On the other end of the line, Julian Roth, one of the nation's top litigators, replied in a low voice. Evelyn, I've been waiting for your call for a long time. The night wind howled. The gears of revenge had begun to turn. stepping out of the luxury apartment building I had poured 7 years of my life into. The cold Manhattan night wind cut like a blade against my face. I didn't shed a single tear. My breathing didn't even falter. In the world of a top actuary, emotion is the lowest form of currency. Only data, law, and logic can construct an absolute killing net. 10 minutes later, I was seated in the private conference room of a top-tier law firm on Fifth Avenue. Julian Roth slid a cup of hot coffee across the table to me. The eyes behind his glasses gleamed with a predator's sharpness. "You got them?" Julian asked. I slapped the forged Nevada divorce decree, bearing Chloe's forged signature, onto the table. Along with it, I laid out a detailed ledger of every bill I had paid for Mark and his family over the past 7 years, totaling $6,400,000. Julian flipped through the documents, a mocking smirk curling his lips. Obtaining a secret judgment in Nevada based on false residency, forging the return receipt, then using that default judgment to transfer assets in New York. A textbook case of fraud on the court. Evelyn, if we file a motion to vacate in Nevada, that decree will be worthless in a few weeks. No, Julian. I took a sip of my coffee, my tone as calm as if discussing the weather. Vacating it directly is too easy for them. They want to play. I'll play a much bigger game with them. You mean? Julian raised an eyebrow. Mark thinks this decree will allow him to claim a share of my Zurich Trust inheritance tomorrow. He's even used this apartment and my other properties, now in his name, as collateral for a large bank loan. A cold glint flashed in my eyes. 18 U.S. C. 1341 regarding mail and wire fraud, and 1028 regarding identity theft. If he presents these forged documents tomorrow at the trust transfer and tries to divert the funds, it will constitute an overt act in a major cross-border financial felony. Julian grasped my intention, admiration dawning in his gaze. You want him to walk right into the criminal felony trap. But what about his loans? Let him take them, I said coldly. The more he mortgages tonight in his arrogance, the more it will avalanche down on him and his gallery when the truth comes out. And Chloe, as an accessory to the forgery, under the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act UFTA, will freeze every property, car, and personal account she received from Mark. The next morning, 10 a.m., at the Rockefeller Center Executive Conference Hall, representatives from the Zurich Trust and several top-tier notaries had already arrived. The door opened and Mark strode in, resplendent in a tailored Italian suit. Behind him, Patricia, draped in fur, held her chin high like a triumphant matriarch. Chloe, clinging to Mark's arm, wore a smug, victorious smile, seeing me seated at the head of the table. Mark shot me a contemptuous glance and plopped down opposite me. Evelyn, I'm surprised you had the nerve to show up. Mark threw a supplemental legal agreement onto the table with a sharp smack, his voice loud enough for all the foreign lawyers to hear. Distinguished notaries, I am Ms. Evelyn Vance's legal, lawfully wedded husband, or rather, her priority assignee under the Nevada Court's Property Division, regarding this $50 million trust inheritance. Based on our marital agreement, I am entitled to 50% of it and the right to oversee the remaining funds. Patricia snorted loudly. What would a woman who couldn't even produce an heir do with all that money but squander it? Mark's gallery needs to expand internationally. This money is better off in our hands, serving society. Chloe, ever the assistant, adjusted Mark's tie with a sweet smile. Evelyn, you need to be sensible. Mark has already been considerate enough not to throw you out on the street. You'd better sign the papers and not make things uglier than they have to be. The trust representative frowned and looked at me. Ms. Vance, is this true? The conference room was saturated with Mark's greed, Patricia's vitriol, and Chloe's hypocrisy. They were like 3 carrion crows, desperately trying to tear a chunk of flesh from me. I watched their performance impassively. Not a single muscle in my face twitched. Mark, I began, my voice low yet sharp enough to cut through the smugness. Are you sure you want to rely on that Nevada decree as your legal basis for claiming $25 million of my inheritance? Of course. Mark puffed out his chest. It's black and white. with a court seal. It's useless for you to deny it now. You have no chance of overturning this. Very well. I turned to Julian, who had been silent until now. Julian, you can begin. Julian smiled faintly, withdrew a stack of documents stamped with red seals from his briefcase, and calmly placed them before the trust representative and notaries. Simultaneously, several federal agents in black suits from the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force, along with New York State prosecutors, silently pushed open the conference room doors and sealed all exits. Mark's triumphant smile froze on his face. Patricia's expression shifted dramatically, and she shrieked, "Who are you people? Do you know what this place is? Get out, Mrs. Thorne. Please be quiet." The prosecutor flashed his badge, his tone stern. "We have received a report concerning a major international financial fraud and judicial document forgery." Julian rose, his voice ringing clear and precise throughout the hall. Under New York Penal Law 170, 31st-degree forgery, and Nevada Revised Statutes 199-21 providing false evidence to court, Mr. Mark Thorne and Ms. Chloe Sterling are accused of, 14 months ago, conspiring to forge Ms. Evelyn Vance's signature and proof of residency to obtain an illegitimate default divorce decree. Julian gestured to the large screen, which instantly displayed meticulous handwriting analysis reports and Nevada entry-exit records. The analysis shows the signature on the return receipt was executed by Chloe Sterling. Furthermore, Ms. Vance was in Europe on business during the alleged service period and was in no position to receive any documents. The Nevada Supreme Court has issued an emergency order 2 hours ago declaring this divorce judgment void ab initio void from the start. Mark's face drained of all color, and beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. "No. That's impossible. You're lying." More importantly, Julian continued, his tone now icy, "Mr. Mark Thorne, fully aware that the decree was fraudulently obtained, attempted today to use this false document to appropriate Ms. Vance's $50 million inheritance. He has also used the fraudulently obtained properties as collateral for a $10 million bridge loan from Chase Bank. Under 18 U.S.C. 1344 bank fraud. Given the enormous sums involved, this constitutes a serious criminal offense." Upon hearing this, Chloe's legs gave way, and she collapsed into her chair, her designer handbag spilling to the floor. Patricia, panicked, grabbed Mark's arm. "Mark, what's going on? You told me everything was settled." Mark's eyes were bloodshot. Like a gambler who had lost everything, he lunged forward, trying to tear up the documents. "Fake. This is all made up. Evelyn, you viper, you're setting me up." Two federal agents stepped forward swiftly, expertly twisting Mark's arms behind his back. Click. The cold steel of handcuffs locked around his wrists. "Mark Thorne, you are under arrest." The prosecutor read the Miranda warning. Mark struggled violently, his expensive suit crumpling, his perfect hair now a mess. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with desperate pleading. "Evelyn, I'm your husband. 7 years. You can't do this to me. Please, tell them it's a misunderstanding." I rose from my chair and walked over to him. I looked down at him, my gaze devoid of anger or sadness, only the cold disdain one holds for a mere insect. "Mark," I said, leaning close to his ear, my voice a quiet, calm murmur meant only for him. "Just now you said you wanted to reclaim your freedom. Now, go enjoy your freedom. In prison." "No, Evelyn." Mark's agonized screams echoed down the hallway as the agents dragged him out like a sack of garbage. Patricia watched her son being taken away, stunned. Then she turned on me, her claws out. "You bitch. You ruined my son. I'll kill you." But 2 officers stepped in front of her, pinning her against the wall. "Mrs. Thorne," Julian said with a polite smile, handing her a summons. "As an accessory to the concealment and transfer of illicit assets, and as a defendant in multiple counts of malicious destruction of property, it seems the coming days will see you spending quite a bit of time in court and in custody." Chloe crumpled to the floor, trembling violently, tears and snot mixing on her face. She crawled over, trying to grab the hem of my skirt. Evelyn, please. I was forced by Mark. He seduced me. Made me forge the signature. For the sake of our friendship. Please. Let me go. I stepped back, avoiding her grubby hands. Chloe, when you were my assistant, I taught you a lot of things. I looked down at her, my voice flat, but I forgot to teach you the most important one. Touch my things, and you will pay the price. I turned my back on the desperate clowns, now sinking into their abyss. Julian, initiate phase 2. Seize the gallery, recover the assets, and execute social annihilation. 3 days after Mark was taken away by federal agents. The entire Manhattan art world and social circle was rocked by an earthquake. Chloe thought she could save herself by implicating Mark. But she vastly underestimated my abilities as an actuary. Over the past 40 hours, I had led Julian's forensic accounting team in a deep dive audit of Chloe's 7 bank accounts, 2 properties, and 3 offshore accounts. I sat in the office of Mark's West Village gallery. A thick stack of bank statements and asset ledgers on the desk before me. The door burst open. Chloe rushed in, disheveled, eyes sunken, having not slept for days. Her usual elegance was gone. Evelyn. Chloe ran to my desk, slammed her hands on it, her voice hoarse. Please. Drop the charges. The prosecutor says if they prosecute for commercial fraud and identity theft, I'm facing at least 15 years. I'm only 28. I can't let my life be ruined. I didn't even look up from the audit report. In a perfectly even tone, I said, Chloe, 3 years ago, when you were fired from your previous company and drowning in credit card debt, I brought you into my office and offered you a $200,000 salary. I turned a blind eye when you used my cards to buy Hermes. I never stopped you when you used my connections to network. But I never thought you would use the hand I extended to you to forge my divorce. It was Mark who forced me. Chloe sobbed, desperation and pleading in her voice. Mark said you were cold and didn't love him. He said if I helped him get his assets, he'd marry me and give me $2 million. He fooled me. Evelyn, we're sisters. Please, just forgive me this once. Sisters. I slowly looked up, a hint of ironic amusement in my eyes. Chloe. According to the New York Civil Practice Law and the Fraudulent Transfer Act, over the past 2 years, while acting as my assistant, you embezzled $1,800,000 from my corporate accounts and transferred it to a joint account you and Mark established in the Cayman Islands. That money has already been frozen. Chloe's face went ashen. Additionally, I slid a supplementary complaint across the desk to her. Because you signed a non-disclosure agreement (NDA) as my personal assistant and breached it by disclosing my personal financial information and the Zurich Trust details to a third party, I have officially filed a $5 million claim for breach of contract. As of 5 p.m. today, a court-ordered asset freeze will be placed on all your bank accounts. As of right now, you don't have enough money to buy a cup of coffee. Chloe stumbled back a few steps, her legs giving way, and she crashed to the floor, trembling. She reached out to grab my pant leg. No. You can't. Evelyn, give me a way out. I'll testify against Mark. I'll tell them everything. The prosecution doesn't need your testimony to convict Mark. Chloe. I stood up, looking down at her. You are of no value to me anymore. At that moment, 2 uniformed marshals entered and presented an arrest warrant. Chloe Sterling. You are under arrest for grand larceny, commercial fraud, and forgery. Please come with us. The desperate shrieks that echoed down the hallway as Chloe was dragged out were deafening. Before I could even sit down again, another commotion erupted from the gallery entrance. Patricia stormed in. Her hair was a mess. She clutched a cane, her face a mask of fury. Evelyn, you evil woman. Mark is coughing up blood in his cell. Are you happy now? He was your husband. How could you treat him so cruelly? I leaned against the desk and looked at her coldly. Patricia. Choose your words carefully. Mark and I were divorced 14 months ago. As you yourselves were so eager to tell me. Don't play dumb with me. Patricia waved her cane and screamed. You knew he was just desperate to save his gallery. You have $50 million. What's wrong with giving him 20? You couldn't give him a child. Our family keeping you around was a blessing. You go to the prosecutors right now and withdraw the complaint. Admit you signed those papers willingly. Otherwise, I'll die right here. This kind of emotional blackmail and shamelessness might once have disgusted and exhausted me. But now, in my eyes, she was nothing but a desperate clown in a losing battle. Die right here. I laughed coldly. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The room filled with the sharp, venomous sound of Patricia's voice. Recorded 2 weeks ago and again just days before. What's there to choose? A belly that can't produce a son doesn't deserve good food. This house belongs to Mark now. Get out. At tomorrow's inheritance reception, Mark will be there as your legal ex-husband. The malicious words reverberated throughout the gallery. Patricia's face went from pale to purple, her lips quivering violently. You recorded me. Not only recorded, Patricia. I switched off the phone. My gaze as cold as winter frost. Under New York Penal Law 155-40. Because you knowingly aided in Mark's criminal enterprise and illegally appropriated valuable items from my private apartment including my mother's 30,000 euro heirloom necklace. You are an accomplice to the crime. I walked closer, lowering my voice to the softest, deadliest whisper. Aren't you so obsessed with the old aristocratic Thorne family name? 10 minutes ago, I had my PR team send Mark's arrest records, Chloe's testimony, and these recordings to every major media outlet and social platform in Manhattan. Patricia's face went slack, her body trembling violently. What did you say? By tomorrow morning, the entire New York social scene will know that the so-called old aristocracy, Thorne family, is nothing but a pack of street corner grifters who lived off a woman, committed fraud, and forged court documents to rob their ex-wife. I smiled. Patricia, the Thorne name is thoroughly ruined. Ugh, Patricia gasped, clutching her chest, and collapsed to the floor, convulsing. I didn't even spare her a glance. I said to the security guard at the door, call an ambulance for Mrs. Thorne, and inform the police that as soon as she's stabilized, they should proceed with her routine interrogation. The guard nodded and carried the now fainting Patricia out. The gallery fell silent again. I walked to the window and looked out at the bustling Manhattan street. The first, humiliating act was over. The final, merciless reckoning had only just begun. Mark thought prison was the end. No, that was just the first step into his personal hell. My phone buzzed. A message from Julian. Evelyn, Chase Bank has officially filed to collect on Mark's gallery loan. $12 million. His lawyer has filed a bail application. I stared at the screen, a cold smile playing on my lips. I typed back, oppose bail, and sell all of Mark's debt contracts in full to Manhattan's largest distressed asset collection agency. Let him experience his creditors' care even from inside his cell. Night fell. The net of revenge was tightening. In the Manhattan business world, a dead opponent is far less valuable than one who is bankrupt and drowning in debt. On the 4th day of Mark's incarceration at Rikers Island, I launched my economic deathblow offensive. He thought his only problem was the federal indictment. He had no idea that for the past 7 years, his gallery had only survived because I had been pumping my own money into it to keep it afloat. At 2 p.m., I sat in the Manhattan Commercial Court. Opposite me was Mark's high-priced defense attorney, Stephen, who also happened to be his friend. Stephen's forehead was slick with sweat, and his papers were scattered across the table. Your Honor, Julian rose, his voice steady and powerful. Under New York Debtor and Creditor Law DCL 273, within the past 3 years, Mr. Mark Thorne executed 47 unsecured promissory notes to my client, Ms. Evelyn Vance, for the purpose of gallery operations and art acquisitions, totaling $8,900,000, given Mr. Thorne's criminal conviction and his deliberate concealment of assets. All debts have triggered the acceleration clause. We request immediate enforcement and seizure. Stephen jumped up to argue. Your Honor, most of those funds were for marital living expenses. Furthermore, My client's assets have been frozen due to the ongoing criminal proceedings, making civil restitution impossible. Marital living expenses. Julian scoffed, presenting a thick stack of receipts to the court. These are Mr. Thorne's expense records for luxury goods, yacht rentals, and transfers to Ms. Chloe Sterling over the past 3 years in Paris, Milan, and Miami. Not a single cent was used for Ms. Vance's personal benefit. Under New York Domestic Relations Law 236, this clearly constitutes marital waste. The judge examined the damning evidence. His brow furrowed. He brought down his gavel with authority. Motion granted. All accounts under Mark Thorne's name are hereby frozen. The West Village Gallery and all its art holdings are to be seized. All property under his name will be auctioned to settle these debts. As the judgment was read, Stephen slumped in his chair, not even glancing at me as he fled the courtroom. An hour later, armed with the court order, I led the enforcement marshals and the appraisers back to the West Village Gallery. The gallery doors were thrown open. Seals were plastered over the masterpieces Mark had cherished. Most of this so-called art was merely collateral he'd used to inflate his value and defraud banks. Just as the appraisers began their inventory, Patricia, now released from the hospital, was wheeled in by a distant relative. "Stop, you thieves! Stop this!" Patricia shrieked, trying to tear the seals off the doors. "This is Mark's gallery. This is Thorne family property. Evelyn, you viper, are you determined to destroy us all?" I turned around and looked down at the pale, trembling Patricia in her wheelchair. "Patricia," I said, walking slowly towards her, my tone flat and devoid of warmth. "Every single painting here, every tile on this floor, even the wheelchair you're sitting in, all of it was bought with my money. Legally, the Thorne family has nothing left." Patricia's eyes burned with hatred. She gripped the armrests of her chair, her voice a hoarse roar. "You're lying. Mark was your husband. Even if you divorce, he's entitled to half. You got that 50 million. How can you not give him any? Your money is his money. It seems you still don't understand." I took a debt liquidation statement from Julian and dropped it into her lap. Mark's total current debt is 12 million in bank loans, 8,900,000 on his promissory notes to me, 3 million in supplier debt, and 2 million in back taxes and penalties to the IRS. Total, $25,900,000. I leaned closer to her ear, my voice soft as if telling a bedtime story. Even if he got the 20 million, he'd still owe almost 6 million. And as the guarantor on these debts, Patricia, your old apartment will be on the auction block tomorrow. No. No. Patricia's eyes bulged wildly, shaking her head frantically. "That's my last home. You can't sell my home. I'm an old woman. Where will I live? That's not my concern." I stepped back, taking a wet wipe from my bag and meticulously cleaning the fingers that had touched her wheelchair. "Perhaps you can apply for government homeless assistance. It would be more fitting for your current station. You monster. I'll kill you." Patricia struggled to lunge from her wheelchair, but was held back by the marshals and officers. "Mrs. Thorne, calm down," the officer warned sternly. "If you continue to obstruct this court-ordered execution, you will be arrested for obstruction of justice." Patricia stared at the police, the cold seals, and my impassive face. She finally realized that her usual tactics of intimidation, emotional blackmail, and shamelessness were meaningless in the face of absolute legal and financial power. She slumped back in her wheelchair, letting out a desperate, heart-wrenching wail that echoed mockingly through the empty gallery. I didn't give her another glance. I turned and walked towards the gallery exit. "Julian," I said quietly, shielding my eyes from the bright sunlight outside, "arrange a visit to Rikers Island for me. I have some things to say to my ex-husband face." "Of course, Evelyn," Julian smiled. "I've already prepared a full set of debt enforcement documents for Mr. Thorne. I'm sure he'll be very surprised to see you." Outside the window, Manhattan's bustle continued. The social annihilation of the Thorne family was only reaching its climax. The visiting room at Rikers Island was thick with stifling cloying air, reeking of antiseptic and mildew. On the other side of the glass partition, Mark sat in a baggy orange jumpsuit. His handcuffs and shackles clanked sharply against the metal table and chair. Just 4 days in. His once impeccable hair was greasy and disheveled. His face overgrown with stubble. Dark circles carved deep beneath his eyes. He was a husk. Drained of all vitality. When he saw me sit down across from him, his bloodshot eyes widened. He lunged at the bulletproof glass, only to be slammed back into his seat by the guard. Evelyn, you came to see me. Mark grabbed the phone receiver, his hands shaking violently. His voice broken and hoarse. You're dropping the charges, right? This is all just a joke. A lesson, right? 7 years. Evelyn, I was just blind. Manipulated by Chloe. She seduced me. She made me sign it. I slowly picked up the receiver, holding it to my ear. Looking at this pathetic display, I felt nothing but a cold, hollow stillness. Mark, I said, smiling, my voice clear through the speaker. Chloe has already confessed everything in the interrogation room next door, including your Cayman Islands accounts and every step you took to forge that Nevada residency proof. Do you think the prosecution will believe you? Or the mountains of bank statements? Mark's face contorted, shifting from pleading to sheer terror. No, Evelyn, I'm your husband. You can't just let me die in here. Do you know what this place is like? The hardened criminals beat me every day. They steal my food. Make me sleep next to the toilet. I'll die in here. Wouldn't that be fitting? I leaned forward slightly, my eyes sharp as knives. You're enjoying your freedom, Mark. Just like when you excluded me from your life 14 months ago. What do you want? Mark finally broke, pounding his fist against the glass, screaming hysterically. You've seized the gallery, taken the house, made my mother homeless. You've taken everything. Are you trying to kill me? Taken everything. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Mark, you overestimate yourself. Your suffering has only just begun. I gestured for Julian to hold up a document against the glass for Mark to see. This is the assignment of debt to Blackstone Distressed Asset Management. I watched his face drain of color. I have sold your debt to Meal $890,000 of it at a discount to them. The managing partner of this firm is a well-known shark in New York's underground financial world. Mark's pupils contracted violently, the last traces of blood draining from his face. His lips quivered, barely able to form words. You sold my debt to loan sharks. They're not loan sharks. They're just very adept at pursuing debts using legal and highly efficient methods. I spoke slowly, each word a dagger. Under the agreement, even while you serve your federal sentence, the only remaining inheritance from your father, that piece of land in New Jersey, will be liquidated at auction next week. And your mother Patricia's retirement account has already been garnished as collateral for her guarantee. No, you viper. That's my mother's pension. That's the Thorne ancestral home. Mark's eyes were practically bleeding as he hammered the glass. How dare you? How can you be so cruel? Cruel. I looked at him coldly. When you conspired with Chloe to forge my signature, using a fake judgment to steal $50 million and throw me out on the street, did you think about cruelty? When Patricia poured her leftovers into my soup and called me barren to my face, did you think about cruelty? Each of my questions landed like a sledgehammer on Mark's chest. His mouth opened and closed, his breathing ragged, but he couldn't form a single rebuttal. Mark, you thought you were orchestrating the perfect marital heist. I dropped the smile, my face returning to its original icy poise. But in my eyes, you were nothing but a flawed actuarial problem. Your greed, your cowardice, your arrogance, they were all just leverage I used to settle the account. Mark went completely limp. He slid from his chair to his knees on the floor. And before the guards and other visitors, he slammed his forehead repeatedly against the glass. Evelyn, I was wrong. I was so wrong. He wailed, tears and snot streaming down his face. I'm begging you, look at what we had. Please, just give me and my mother a way out. I'll take nothing. Just let me live. The visiting room fell silent. The The guards watched this display with cold contempt. I slowly rose to my feet, looking down at the pathetic, groveling creature on the floor. "Kneel there, Mark." I hung up the receiver, placing it gently back in its cradle. "But remember, in the face of the law and the price you must pay, your dignity is worthless." I turned and walked out of the room, my heels echoing on the linoleum floor. Behind me, Mark's soul-wrenching sobs and curses faded into the distance. Outside, the Manhattan air was crisp, the sky a cloudless, brilliant blue. I knew the final reckoning was coming. 3 months later, the United States District Court, Southern District of New York. It was the final sentencing day for the Mark Thorne and Chloe Sterling grand financial fraud and judicial document forgery case. The gallery was packed with journalists and members of New York high society. Whispers filled the air about the scandal that had rocked Manhattan. I was seated in the front row of the plaintiff's section, dressed in a sharply tailored black sleeveless suit, my expression serene and composed. Amidst the murmurs, I looked like a guest attending a soiree, elegant and untouchable. At the defense table sat Mark and Chloe, flanked by 2 impassive marshals. Mark, in his prison jumpsuit, was gaunt, his face hollow, his once handsome features now a mask of despair. Chloe kept her head down, tears streaming steadily onto her knees, her handcuffs clinking softly. The past 3 months of pretrial detention had exposed them to the brutal reality of the bottom rungs of the prison system. In the far corner of the gallery, Patricia sat hunched in a threadbare, faded dress. Her ancestral home had been auctioned off to satisfy the judgments. Now, she relied on social services for even a cheap motel room. The judge's gavel came down with a resounding crack. The room fell silent. The stern-faced judge put on his glasses, opened the thick sentencing order, and read in a grave, sonorous voice, "With regard to the defendant, Mark Thorne, on charges of violating 18 U.S.C. 1341 wire fraud, 1344 bank fraud, and New York Penal Law 170, 31st-degree forgery. The evidence is clear and conclusive. This court finds the defendant, Mark Thorne, guilty of cross-border financial fraud, judicial document forgery, and identity theft. On all counts, the defendant is sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole, with a fine of $15 million, and is permanently barred from all commercial activities." The judge paused briefly, turning his gaze to the trembling Chloe. "With regard to the defendant, Chloe Sterling, as an accomplice in the forging of legal documents, identity theft, and embezzlement of business funds, guilty of grand larceny and commercial fraud. Considering her cooperation with the prosecution, the defendant is sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, and all assets acquired through illegal means are hereby forfeited." "No!" Chloe's shriek cut through the silence as she collapsed, a dead weight, to the floor. Dragged out by the marshals, Mark looked completely hollow, the last of his spirit drained. An 18-year sentence meant he would be an old man of 60 before he saw the outside world again. Forever burdened by insurmountable debt. Just as the marshals moved to take him away, Mark snapped. He broke free momentarily and lunged towards the railing separating him from the gallery. "Evelyn!" His voice was a raw, desperate howl. His eyes bloodshot. 18 years. That's my whole life. Don't you have any pity for me at all? Not even a scrap of mercy for what we once shared." Slowly, I rose, buttoning my suit jacket, and walked to the railing, stopping just a foot away. The journalists in the gallery raised their cameras, flashes exploding like 1,000 tiny suns. I looked down at him, my gaze devoid of triumph at vanquishing an enemy, devoid of any emotion. It was the look of a person who had seen everything, felt everything, and now held only a cold, detached calm. "Mark," I said softly, leaning in so that only he could hear me, "do you know the most basic principle of actuarial science? It's to write off all toxic assets and bad investments. You and your desires were just a bad debt on my books. And now that account is settled." Mark's lips quivered, but no sound came out. The marshals grabbed him again, firmly, and dragged him out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, sealing the rest of his life away. In the corner of the gallery, Patricia let out a final, despairing wail and slumped in her seat. Unconscious. No one moved to help her. I turned to Julian and smiled. Let's go, Julian. We have real work to do. Stepping out of the courthouse, the bright sun shone down on the Manhattan street. The air was fresh. With a hint of sweetness, Julian handed me the final confirmation from the Zurich Trust. Evelyn, the full $50 million has been deposited into your personal account. Chase Bank and the regulators have officially unfrozen all your personal assets. Thank you. Julian. I took the document and signed it. This 3-month campaign had been bloodless. No hysterics. No public mudslinging, just the unyielding logic of the law and the crushing power of financial systems. Those who had sought to tear me apart and drain me dry had been ground to dust by the very greed they had woven. I stood at a crossroads in the financial district, looking at the endless flow of people and the towering skyscrapers. My past concessions and patient endurance were gone. From this moment on, my life belonged only to my own precise calculations. I raised my hand and hailed a taxi, sliding into the back seat. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked brightly. I turned to look out the window at the radiant, sun-drenched city. A slow, easy smile curving my lips. JFK Airport. I'm going to Zurich.